Can you continue growing tomatoes indoors throughout the winter? Guten Yardening, everybody! In my hands, I have one of quite a few bags of frozen garden candy. That's our cherry tomatoes that we froze after harvesting. Now, from our experience, this is a really easy way to preserve tomatoes, and they have lasted us, in some cases, well over a year frozen. Now, these are perfect to put into just about any kind of recipe. You don't even have to thaw them. You can throw them right into the pan and let them cook. But if you followed our channel for any length of time, you probably know I call these garden candy because they do, in my opinion, taste just like the sweetest candy that comes out of our garden. And that means that I really like the taste of them fresh. Well, these are not something that I would thaw and then try to eat just like that. I'd want to put these in a recipe. And so that puts us in a bit of a quandary, because with our obsession with tomatoes, we don't want to just limit ourselves to consuming them frozen or in recipes all winter long. That's an awful lot of time to not have fresh tomatoes. And so this season we decided to dedicate a good bit of our raised bed, our indoor raised bed, to growing tomatoes, and we want to show you what that looks like. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about growing tomatoes indoors. So join us indoors here in Zone 5, Wisconsin for a nice little raised bed tour. Now, for those of you who may have missed it, we did a cost breakdown video in our Yardening Finance series where we talked about the cost to build this indoor raised bed. So you definitely want to check that out so you can see what went into this addition of about 9 square feet of gardening space. Now, our primary focus is going to be on our tomatoes in here. You can see we've dedicated quite a bit of space and they're looking really nice. And I am going to talk to you about that, but I do want to show you a couple other things that we have growing in here. Though I'm not going to show you everything because I don't want to ruin all of our surprises of what we have going on. But here in the center, we've dedicated a little space, as you can see, to a nice salad mix. And one of the reasons why we like a salad mix like this, something to plant in our raised bed, is because with these mustard greens and you can see our kale back in here, that salad mix is going to give us an opportunity to be harvesting within about a month of planting. So these leaves are ready to come out here and they'll keep growing, and they'll grow nicely in the space that's underneath these tomatoes as they get bigger, because the light that we have in here, and you can see there are actually 2 lights, although I don't have this one on yet. The lights that we have in here are providing plenty of light that reach down through the foliage, especially as we prune back our tomatoes to get to these greens underneath. So some nice salad in here, and I want to show you something that I think is really important this season. Last year, when we brought in our plants, we brought in a couple of pepper plants, and we didn't do a very good job of preparing them for the winter, and we brought in a bunch of aphids with them. We didn't know it at the time, but very quickly those aphids nearly took over our entire indoor growing space. If it wasn't for our ladybugs who came along and helped us out quite a bit, and the diatomaceous earth, the DE that we spread on here to really help conquer that problem, I think we would have lost everything. Well, this season we brought in way more pepper plants, and we can see one of them here starting to come back to life. But we brought in way more pepper plants, but we did a much better job prepping them to come inside, washing them off in soap, really cutting back all those leaves and all the places where our aphids could have been hiding and would have been a problem. And as I go through all of these leaves, what you will find is not a single aphid. And we plan to keep it that way because that is a huge upgrade from last year. And we're more careful this year. We're seeing better results. Now let's focus in on these tomatoes. First of all, I'm going to turn on the second light in here, and you're going to hear a little sound because this second light has a fan, whereas our first light doesn't have one. It doesn't get as hot. And you'll also see a difference. You see that pink hue. So we have 2 different lights going here above our raised bed. One of them is a 2,000 watt full spectrum light that we've priced out for you in the past, and we'll have a link to this or something similar as well. So it's a little bit smaller, but it's a 2,000 watt light. And the other is our hydroplanet light, which has 8 T5s in here that it's using to spread the light onto our plants. Now we have a couple of different varieties of tomatoes here. This is a white tomato which I think is going to be really cool looking when we finally harvest it. It'll be our first time growing these white tomatoes. And you can see here we have the beginnings of some flowers. So we're going to have flowers coming off here. Here, I'll get in real close pretty soon. And then we have some rainbow mix back here. But I can see based on the height and based on the way the plants are responding that they're actually doing better underneath this smaller light. Now the difference might not be evident at first until I turn off the light here, and you can see I've got lots of flowers. And I'll stress this, all of these tomatoes in here are the same age. Okay, so you can see we're probably 7 inches shorter. This one here in the front is about the same size as our one in the back underneath that smaller light, but the big difference is definitely the flowers. And if we come right inside here, you can see we already have fruit coming in. Because we're in a raised bed, that means we are limited a little bit in the height of what we can do or allow our plants to get to. This grow tent is about 7 feet tall, so we have probably, with the lights there, about 3 feet of growing space. And so what that means is we have to pick varieties of tomatoes that are going to be determinate or shorter, or we have to keep them well pruned in order to keep them in our space and really fitting our space. Or I suppose like some of our friends who are growing with hydroponics, they're growing those dwarf tomatoes, which look absolutely awesome. They're about 8 to 12 inches tall. Those are really cool too, but we decided to go with these white tomatoes, and what we're doing is just keeping them pruned back. And basically we're just going to keep them to the height that is going to work for us. So we're not going to let them get above a certain height before we cut back those apical stems, before we stop the growth vertically. Now, if you watch some of our summer videos, you know that we did a little bit of a different experiment with our tomatoes where we really thinned them out so they were growing tomatoes, letting those tomatoes ripen and not as focused in on the green leaves. So that's a possibility here as well. We could really thin those out. But I think more important than that right now, I think we're going to let these greens grow because we have another idea in mind. Remember, these tomatoes have suckers that can come right out of them, just like this. You see it coming off. Here's our main stem. Here's one of our lateral leaves, our lateral stems here. And then we have diagonally coming out of here a sucker. And so what we can do is come in and cut that off. And if you're somebody who wants to get a head start on your spring planting for tomatoes, you can get those in water, let them root, and then you'll be in good shape to have an early start rather than just planting from seed. Well, one thing I'm really excited about growing these tomatoes is just how simple it has been to get them going here and to keep them healthy. Remember, these are plants that can handle a lot of pruning. Believe me, our results merit that. Our results meet that out. The one thing we're going to have to come in and do is as these get a little bit bigger, we don't have wind, we have our fan in here, but there's still the possibility of the weight causing them to kind of collapse over. So one thing you're going to have to keep in mind if you're growing one of these taller vegetables like a tomato, just like we've done here, we're attaching loosely, so we're not hurting any of the growth, some string around these to hold them up vertical. Now, if you don't have a raised bed and you just want to try grow bags, well, that's definitely possible as well. These are 3-gallon grow bags, and we have 2 plants, 2 tomatoes in each one of these. And so this is something that we'll also have to keep in mind that we'll need to support, but this actually gives us a good bit more height if we want to allow them to grow vertically rather than limiting that height, because now they have about 6 feet of room to grow. Well, I think from our experience so far and our experience last year, these tomatoes are a pretty good addition to an indoor garden, especially if, like I am, you're a bit obsessed with that garden candy and you want to taste that sweet tomato taste, that fresh tomato taste all year long. Now, I would say we're still a couple of weeks out at least from our first ripe tomatoes, but once they get started, just like when they're growing outdoors, you should see a pretty long season. And unless you've had an issue already with diseases in your indoor soil, remember a lot of the stuff that's out there you won't have an issue with indoors. And if you're able to keep the pests from making their way in, those tomatoes can last you for quite a long time. And as I said in the video, you can take pieces of those tomatoes and make more as you head out into that spring season. So you could be really ahead of the game when it comes time to getting them outdoors. And that's something that we want to take advantage of here in Zone 5. Now, for the first time, I'm going to mention something that's a part of our Guten Yardening outreach, a place where you can go to see some blogs that we're writing, where you can go to see links to some of our videos and some of our affiliates for products that we also use here at Guten Yardening, and that is GutenYardening.com. Now, GutenYardening.com is something that we are getting started with, and we are planning to expand and grow. So please go over there, check it out, and leave us a comment at GutenYardening.com to let us know that you've visited. Well, we hope you enjoyed our video today. If you haven't tried growing tomatoes indoors, we highly recommend it. And if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.